And then am I moving it like when she gets the flag, or are we keeping it all here? Or
I think I might. Let's just kind of see what happens. But I do think she wants it to kind of be closer to her. So what we can do is, it's not very windy, so I'll take this off of here.
hmm?
Participants. And so see the green.
Mm-hmm.
So we're good. It's probably a good idea because otherwise you start stuff in. She's a force of it.
Iowa girl.
You know, I don't know if any organizations are that big. My daughters don't belong to 5 different church organizations like I did at their age. That was interesting. Their world is being referenced. And maybe my grandparents. Well, they did.
Hi, beautiful.
Oh, hi. We keep meeting like this.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I am. And you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Yeah. Good idea to have the umbrella.
Hey, I have a few more if you need one over up by the stand over there.
Oh, I think I can
We can
survive.
share.
Big as this funeral is, I'm surprised it isn't bigger.
I know. I know.
Impressive man, impressive resume.
Absolutely. How do you know Marvin?
Well, I've known Andrea for almost 40 years because she was a client of a law firm I once worked for. Then Marv was a member of Columbine Lodge for a lot of years, member of B'nai B'rith Lodge for a number of years, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew him
Wow.
from a number of different.
Yes.
There's chairs. Come sit. Our family is this big.
Ladies and gentlemen, this ceremony is about to begin. So we ask that you give your undivided attention to the pallbearers as they bring the casket forward. This is also a good time to make sure your cell phones are turned off.
I can't see you because I'm so.
Or step. Well, the cheap seats.
Our tradition begins morning with a blessing. We praise the judge of truth, who takes but also gives life. Adonai, your judgment at times puzzles us, but we place our trust in your righteousness and accept our lot and our loss. For were a mortal to live but a single year or 1,000, it would never seem enough. Your discretion is beyond us, and therefore, in the words of our tradition, we say the words of blessing. Please repeat after me. Baruch, Dayan, Ha'emet. Praised is the judge of truth.
The career ribbons, they're right by your foot.
When a life is gone from amongst us, it tears our world, and like a cloth, a heart will mend, but it will never be the same. I call upon Major General Steve Best, retired president of West Plains Society of Denver, to conduct the military presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, military honors will continue playing of taps. It is customary to stand, place your right hand over your heart. If you have served or are currently serving, you may raise your hand salute. At this time, please stand. Please be seated.
The psalmist wrote, "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Thus may we live each hour wisely and well. While time remains, may we so live that no day passes without bringing us closer to some worthy achievement. Thus do we honor those who have passed this way before us, giving us the priceless gift of love, of life, of hope, and of faith. Even as we praise God in times of joy, we acknowledge God in times of sorrow." Avotenu le'olam va'ed Tzurchayenu magen yishenu atahu l'dor v'dor modim anachnu We acknowledge you are Adonai, our God and the God of our ancestors forever, rock of our lives and shield of our salvation in every generation. Every one of us is given the gift of life. If it is preserved jealously and selfishly, it impoverishes and saddens. But if spent for others, it enriches and beautifies. Life is not a having and a getting, but a being and a becoming. Life is action and passion. To live well, we must have a faith to live by, a self fit to live with, and a work to live for. be such a human being and live such a life that if every being were such as you and every life like yours, this earth would be God's paradise. We are given the gift of life one day at a time, and each new day is a gift. Praise be God, whose gift is life. As in the world around us, so too in human life, darkness is followed by light and sorrow by consolation. Life and death are twins. Grief and hope walk hand in hand. Although we cannot know what lies beyond the body's death, we put our trust in the undying spirit that calls us into life and abides to all eternity. We remember Marvin this day through praise of his life. I call on Jay to be our first speaker.
Want to thank Andrea and Joel, Debbie, Rebecca Becker for allowing me to say a few words. I promised the rep I would keep it short. That's really not my nature, but I'll do the best I can. I got to know Marvin many years ago, had the opportunity to spend time with him, particularly on some long drives. And he's loved talking about his experience in the Air Force at Larry Air Base and his time there. And since I live in Larry now, we used to get a magazine that always had a feature article on the history of the base, a lot of times with very rare pictures. And I would give that to Marvin. I thought he'd get a kick out of it. And he would say, oh yeah, I remember when the first one of those things flew into the base, something called the B-36 bomber, I think. I don't know. not an airplane expert. But we had a lot of fun on that in that. And I know how much, as we'll hear and as we know about his service to the veteran community, he really did love being a part of that specific branch, the Air Force. But what I also wanted to focus on was another aspect of his life, something that's equally as important. And I'll start it this way. Did you know that Marvin and I are actually brothers? Not in the family sense, but there's another brotherhood. Marvin was a part of, as I'm a part of, ancient, free, and accepted Masons. Masonry, sometimes referred to as the craft. Both of us are part of the same lodge here in Denver, Columbine Lodge. And I want to emphasize that Masonry is not a religion. Its primary focus is philanthropy, fellowship, support, freedom. And there are certain things that go on in Masonry, in a lodge, for instance, certain dress, certain ritual, and certain phrases. And when I conclude, I want to use one of those phrases, and it's very similar to what we say when we're in shul, amen. So be it, or make it so. And it's the Masonic version of that. And I'll use that at the end of my remarks. This is hard. I'm very used to public speaking, but this is hard. I'm honored that Marvin is being interred here at Mount Nebo with so many other veterans and so many other members of the craft. And it's an honor that he's being interred just a few feet away from another veteran, albeit Navy, and another member of Masonry, my very own dad, right over here. In Masonry, as I mentioned, we have certain rituals and there are certain phrases. You've probably seen pictures before of Masonic ritual, and occasionally we have Masonic rites, Masonic burial rites here at Mount Nebo. And Masons wear what's called an apron. And you've probably seen pictures, for instance, of George Washington wearing a Masonic apron when they laid the foundation for the nation's capital. This is Marvin's apron that was presented to him. And he was raised, as we call raised, to the 3rd degree. And in fact, the lodge wrote on here the dates that that occurred. Now, as the administrator of the cemetery, I'm required to enforce, generally, Orthodox practice within the cemetery. Part of that means whatever goes into the grave ultimately must go back to nature. But after consultation with the halachic authority over the cemetery, it's been determined that it would be appropriate for Marvin to be laid to rest with his Masonic apron. So with your permission, we will do that. To conclude, so that others will have the chance to speak, I'd like to recite a poem. I think this poem is appropriate for those who served in the Air Corps, those who were pilots. And when I finish, I'd like to use the Masonic version of Amen. And as my halachic advisor, teacher, Rabbi Kaitovsky says, never underestimate the power of an Amen. The name of this poem is called High Flight, and I think it's very appropriate for today. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, I put out my hand and touched the face of God. Brother Marvin, may your soul's journey to the protective cover, to the protective wings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Blessed One, be swift and peaceful. Zachor Livracha, may your memory not only be for a blessing, but as an inspiration to family, to community, to country, and to the craft. And as we say in Lodge, so mote it be.
Mr. Gordon Hammond, Vice Commander of the Southern Youth Veterans Association.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like you said, my name is Gordon Hammond. I'm Southern Youth Veterans Association, Vice Commander. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Our Commander Howard Richards Sr. and others of the association couldn't make it here today, so I was volunteered to come up here and speak these words from Howard. It is with a heavy heart that we address this heartfelt moment to offer our condolences to Mr. Meyers' family, friends, and those who knew him well. The Southern Youth Veterans first knew Mr. Meyers in the mid-1980s. Mr. Meyers' vision was to have the Southern Youth Veterans at the table with the UVC. Over time, the Southern Youth became members of the UVC. The Southern Youth honored Mr. Myers at one of the UVC banquets. Approximately 1 year ago, the Southern Youth Veterans Association honored him the title of honorary member of the association, with all the privileges associated with being a member. Our hearts are saddened with his passing, but we will meet again in the spirit world. In the native way, there is no goodbyes. Just I'll see you later. To his family and friends, our hearts reach out to you, to each and every one of you. Respectfully, Howard Richard Senior, Commander, Southern Youth Veterans Association. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone gathered here in person and online, for your support and your tribute to our father, Marvin Meyers. I've promised Bertie I'm going to keep this short, so it'll be under an hour. And as my wife Debbie will attest, this is going to be a little bit non-traditional. So when my dad turned 84, he remarked with an arching eyebrow, "Well, I've now reached the same age at which both my father and grandfather passed away. I always wondered if I'd equal their longevity." We pondered about what the future might hold. We noted that my brother, Jonathan, saved his life from a heart attack at age 64 by scooping him into his van and racing him to Rose Medical Center, where bypass surgery solved the worsening kink in his left anterior descending artery. At age 84, that was likely his healthiest part. At 95 and almost a half when he passed away, it was still probably his healthiest part. There are a couple of other issues. I'll get back to that. All of you here have very likely read the obituary, and indeed, he accomplished so much for so many and led a very full career. Although he routinely put others ahead of himself, I know that he felt that he had a very full life. As I've said a number of times, in the game of life, my dad won a long time ago. The reality is that in these last number of years, it has been more like he's been playing a pinball machine with extra balls, lots of extra balls. Well, the last ball finally went down the middle. About 15 years ago, my dad was hosting, presiding over, or emceeing one of the many United Veterans Committee of Colorado awards banquets that he always attended. These are very impressive affairs in a banquet room filled with the usual 500 or so decorated veterans and guests. On the dais, it's a black tie affair. There are always notable congressmen and representatives at the state and federal level, as well as service members from all the branches and of all the ranks. In the audience, it's suits or full dress uniforms, unless you're Senator currently or Governor Hickenlooper, who is always dressed more informally. This particular banquet, I was startled to the core when the individual introducing my father referred to him as this little man. For those of you who don't know, my father was probably about somewhere in there. So he was introduced as this little man. I looked around the room, looked at the dais, did a double take, looked at the introducer and back at my father. I thought, who the heck is he talking about? My father isn't some little man. He's a giant of a man. Suddenly, I wasn't in my 50s. I was transported back to my childhood. This was a giant who scooped me up on his shoulders, carrying me through the park. This was a giant who bought me my first baseball mitt and taught me how to cast a fishing rod. This was a giant who, when I was 11, definitively made certain that the neighborhood bully would never chase me again. I'm certain that Kelly still remembers that. Well, my father took the podium and with his commanding presence began his usual impressive address to the audience.
I was suddenly snapped out of my childhood. I was suddenly back in my 50s. He was still a giant who had spent his professional career battling the bureaucracies of the world to defend and voice for the underdogs who couldn't voice for their own needs, the developmentally disabled. He was still a giant who passionately battled for funds, services, and facilities to serve the needs of our states and nations' veterans. He was still the giant who would say, "I don't suffer, fools." The audience applauded, and as the banquet continued, the veterans were given their more than well-deserved tributes. My father was truly a giant. He wasn't a little man. He was a giant, perhaps a diminutive giant, but still a giant ready to take on the largest foes. My father's service papers officially listed him at, you won't believe this, at 5 foot 10 inches. That is not a lie. As I said, most of you know him as about 5 foot something even. How does that happen? Most of you don't know about one of his personal battles. Back to his 84th birthday. Indeed, my dad and I discussed that his heart was probably his healthiest part. We also discussed that beyond his healthier heart, he was a complete orthopedic disaster. Bilateral knee surgery due to injuries in the service, 4 artificial joints, a back that was a stainless steel erector set with 4 long rods from top to bottom, and more screws than Home Depot's hardware department. That was just for starters. There was also the right ankle, fused with segments of bone from his hip, and a right leg that was an inch shorter than his left, care of a construction accident at age 41. My father and I were helping my uncle build his house up at Carter Lake. Well, it turns out that having your knee locked when your foot goes through the bottom 2 rungs of a 2x4 ladder after a 1-story fall is not a good thing. Your ankle and fibula shatter, and your tibia might also just break in 2 places as it then comes through to the surface. And with the ever-present command of authority that he maintained throughout his life and strong presence of mind, my father called out, "I think I have a compound fracture." Who says that? Indeed, we found him lying in a rapidly expanding pool of blood. He then proceeded to give instructions to my Uncle Sandy and me on how to use his belt to make and then apply a tourniquet below his knee. I then ran for help and later got my first ambulance ride. I didn't mention that my dad was a Boy Scout. Here is his Boy Scout handbook from 1942. It turns out that the handbook has a whole section on first aid and a very nice segment with detailed drawings on how to apply tourniquets starting at page 241. Well, there. Somebody tells me my father got a merit badge in first aid. I grew a lot that day, and I unofficially earned my own merit badge. I started that morning as a 12-year-old. I went to bed that night a lot older. It turns out that binding someone with the tourniquet binds more than the limbs. It binds the individuals together in ways that no one else could imagine. My dad started that morning at 5 foot 10. That was to change. All told, he spent 8 months in the hospital with half a dozen or more trips to the operating room. They managed to avoid the amputation that was constantly threatened. Not surprisingly, he hardly missed a beat at work. With stubborn and heroic resiliency, he turned his hospital room into an office and held daily meetings there with his staff, maintaining the fight for the disabled. Forever tilting to the right due to his 1 inch shorter leg, his musculoskeletal began its inexorable and literal downward decline from there. And that's how he became the diminutive giant that we all knew and respected. He stoically lived the chronic pain and never took narcotics. Although he never saw battle in the military, he was a warrior on the inside for himself. So although this Monday, the last ball finally whizzed down the middle of the pinball machine, I know that he'll always be in our hearts and minds. We can all agree that in any afterlife, he is still strategizing with his colleagues at the Bagel Delicatessen or the New York Daily News and tenaciously battling wayward bureaucrats and legislators and bending them to his will in service to those in need. Some things will never change. And I'm certain that he's looking down or over at us. He's saying, "Nice suit, Joel, but you need a haircut." He was always a dapper dresser. Now, if you'll bear with me, I'd like to share an anecdote that my dad shared with me on a number of occasions. Arriving at Lowry Air Base at the time, after his basic training at Fort Hood, he was asked to pick an area of service. Although he always loved the shooting range, his superiors recommended that the finance department would provide an avenue for advancement. So that's what he signed up for. This is a massive irony, as just 2 days ago, I found his report cards from high school and discovered that he had failing grades in algebra. Who would have thought? He was also failing in Latin. But he had excellent grades in ROTC, citizenship, and inquired. I digress. Over time, he advanced to staff sergeant and supervisor of disbursement, which meant that he was in charge of paying the enlisted soldiers. He did his job too well, as his requests for overseas transfers were denied. Well, one Friday afternoon, just before the 5 p.m. closing, an entire company of around 200 soldiers returned to base and presented to the payroll office after a lengthy deployment. They had weekend passes and wanted their cash before going on liberty. Major in command of the battalion requested that they receive their pay. With a line out the door of over 200 soldiers with pleading eyes bearing down on him, my dad smiled, gave them a salute, and stayed late into the evening processing their cash payroll disbursements. They were all very grateful. The following Monday, the Major returned to the payroll disbursement office and presented my dad a thank you gift of a bottle of Canadian Club whiskey, which was a very big deal apparently at the time. My father told the Major that he would save it for a special occasion. My dad was well known in the family for saving lots of things for special occasions. So here we are, about 77 years later, with the same unopened bottle, still waiting for a special occasion. This bottle has survived countless moves and trips across the country. It's dated 1947, and it says that the contents are at least 6 years old, which means that the contents are at least 84 years old. If today isn't that special occasion, then I don't know what possibly could be. So, at the reception to follow, we're going to finally open this. Cross our fingers that it doesn't taste like vinegar or worse. And with tasting cups, raise a toast to the full life lived in service to others. Veterans get first dibs. My hope is to have a get-together with members of the veterans groups he worked with to toast and roast him. I hope to have some of this Canadian Club whiskey left to share with them as well. Cheers, Dad.
Look around. Friends, family, relatives from far and wide. People as far as Spot, Israel, to Costa Rica, to Chicago, California. We got one in Arizona. Everybody's tuning in. Pennsylvania, did I say that? And thank you for being in person. And those of you on Zoom, thank you for being here. I was thinking pachinko while we were talking like pinball, but I do remember celebrity names. I want to thank you truly for this beautiful turnout, and it captures what Joel said. I mean, I had visuals on every single thing. He didn't say at 12 years old running. It's Carter Lake. I mean, my uncle built 2 houses, and he fell through a stairwell that had been covered, and that was so traumatic for the family. I was a senior in high school that year. I think that explains why they didn't come hear me play Kol Nidre with the orchestra. That might have been it. That might have been it. his dedication to doing the right thing at the right time kind of comes, it comes naturally for me now, as does with my brother and the family. I want to thank, this isn't working, I have notes, honestly. Sorry, guys. I want to thank the caregivers at Colorado State, the Veterans Home. I know you're here. You were here. Thank Ola and your staff. Bravo. Would you turn it? They took care of my father with great respect and professionalism. You were there when the building opened, and they still. Mr. Meyers, who's like the mayor there. I mean, he took such great pride. It became his home. It became his home. And B'nai B'rith and Hadassah and UVC and all the organizations help me out, people. Help me out. Where's that voice? Oh, and Marlena. Yes, council. And when you come to my home, it'll be in the club room. You can see some of the beautiful plaques and honors that he received. Indulge me, let me find this, my note. He made a difference in the lives of children and the people that didn't have a voice for themselves, dismantling Ridge Home and turning it into group homes and work studies and businesses, and empowering the people to, beginning with mainstreaming through all the schools in Colorado. Most of you remember that. As I look around, I could see people that implemented that. And it wasn't enough, you know, I mean, he taught, he was at University of Denver, and from there he you know, did special education at Kudensmiller and Horace Mann and all those different schools. But then he worked as he got his, I think he got all these degrees earlier at University of Denver in administration. So I would take the number 4 bus and sometimes go down to that white building with the gold just directly north of the Capitol. You know, there's underground tunnels you can go through. I never did that. And but the legislation, the compassion that he had for people that did not have the voice transferred to new laws, new verbiage from moral, from moron and imbecile to educable, and it changed over the years, which is really profound in education. I want to thank all the people that traveled far and wide from Durango. Thank you, sir, for Major General Best, who is over there. Thank you, sir. Apparently, they made 10 years ago an arrangement that he would be here for my father in this capacity. We were all we were surprised, but only for a flash, just for a moment. Arda Guerrero, and for your service and everyone in service. If you are in the military, would you please make yourself known right now? Can we look around? Let's acknowledge all of our. When I was a little girl and Dad was working at the dog track, he would come home at different hours, and my parents lived at the Quonset huts at DU and the city housing projects until we were at a duplex, and then we were on South Leyden, and Cook Park was Salamander Pond and things like that, where Havana and Hampton didn't meet. This guy from Chicago that came out on the Zephyr, where we used to travel a lot. Oh, and Aunt Joan is here. This is my Uncle Sandy's wife. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Got lost. Oh, so I would go to the front door of this little tiny girl, and I say, Daddy's coming home. Lots of different times. And when I was coming back from Durango last week, I knew I had to come home right away. Joel and Debbie were coming home, and I heard the message. I heard lots of messages, and I needed to get home. The second I put my cello and my bag down, I got the call from Suzanne, one of Ola's and the colleagues. The dad, they were very sorry that he had passed. And I doubled back and went over to the Veterans Home. And they took such great care. He was clean, he was fresh, he was always ready for the next moment. And Feldman Mortuary and hospice in the corner and the collaboration to make all that work was fantastic. And I admire people in that kind of capacity as a teacher or a musician. We all have a protocol. And my goodness, as I look out to all of you, and I know who's far and wide, I know all the relationships, but the ones I don't know, I'm very curious about. Thank you, friends and family. I admire you in all your occupations because I know you're givers. I can see that, I know that, and please feel comfortable to come over to the condo. I have a lot of Dad's artifacts and this and that, and lots of scarves and PVA hats that you can go home with. All right, Rabbi Birdie, thank you. Another cellist, singer, and also a cantor and rabbi.
So I don't want to merely repeat what you can easily read in the obituary that Andrea, Joel, and Debbie put together. And unfortunately, I didn't know what Joel or Andrea was going to say. So some of the things I say will be repetition. And if you haven't read the obituary yet, I urge you to go to Feldman's Legacy page and do so. Marvin Lee Meyers was born on June 11, 1930 in Chicago, Illinois. He was the son of Harry and Clara Meyers. He grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood, an only child, but made it into the newspapers when, as a child, he fell through the ice in a neighborhood park lake and was rescued by a group of teenage boys. It was his first exposure to getting news and headlines. Marv was close to family and cousins, where he could be found playing with their toys. He would recall how with 15 cents in his pocket, he could take a streetcar to Wrigley's Field, see the game, and take the streetcar home. 5 cents for each thing. It was also the time of a polio epidemic, and Marv remembered that he had to sit every other seat in the movie theater as a precaution. You just heard from Joel. He was not the best of students in high school, but he loved to sing and was excellent at it. And he had high marks in citizenship. So he joined ROTC and not surprisingly left high school at 17 and was inducted into the Army Air Corps in 1947. While he was away, his mother disposed of his rather large and loved collection of comic books. We won't ever know if that's why he later used the GI Bill to return to school, where he then learned to love literature and recite poetry. As a teenager, Marv sold newspapers on the street corner and worked in a cloakroom at a nightclub, where he developed a love and appreciation for fabrics and clothing. At one point, he even thought he'd like to open a clothing store. Years later, he used those discerning skills to take both Andrea and Jackie to buy clothes for their first jobs, to shop with Joel for his wedding, and to always find a compliment to offer Debbie on her wardrobe. But the clothing store never came to be. Instead, when he joined the military, someone whispered into his ear to go into finance. And despite his less than stellar grades in math, algebra, bookkeeping, typing, okay, you get the idea. He went into finance and he advanced quickly to staff sergeant. After first flirting with a master's in business, he later obtained his master's in special education. His organization and leadership skills were honed in the military, as was his defense of being a Jew. Having learned boxing in the boys' club in Chicago, he found that it came handy when more than once during his training days in Texas. Being a Jew was a source of pride for Marv. He lived by the golden rule, and his children, Andrea and Joel, and Jonathan and Michelle, were instilled with a strong value to fight for the underdog and to live by the ethical teachings and principles that Judaism teaches. As we spoke the other day, both Andrea and Joel recited the Shema, followed by the prayer that they had learned as children and that they recited every night. Andrea said she still does. And it showed in other ways as well. I served as the executive administrator of Denver B'nai B'rith during the time that Marv was president there. He was invested in the organization, as he was in every organization that he worked with, doing outreach for volunteers and obtaining funding for a new computer. Marv graced my Seder table along with Andrea for many years and showed up for other joyous and not so joyous life events for me, as I did for him, including Joel and Debbie's wedding and rather momentous birthdays. Marv was also a frequent visitor to Israel, 8 times, including volunteer missions, and once after a big win at Black Hawk when he took the family with him. At a Jewish singles mixer in Lowry, Marv met Nancy. As was done back in those days, they wrote love letters to each other, and in December of 1950 were married at Lowry. A few years later, Andrea was born, followed by Michelle and Joel and Jonathan. He's also survived by his grandchildren, Jeremy and Jared. But Marv's caretaking extended beyond blood relatives. He took the son of a friend under his wing when that friend's plane went down and he could not be found. He worked for the state, and in that capacity, he traveled through mountain towns, setting up group homes and procedures for mainstreaming those with disabilities who were being turned out from their living situations. As I read through the Facebook postings, there were numerous tributes that mentioned Marv as guide and mentor. He was a tough dad, spending so much time and energy working. There are memories yet of the VW bus club and tandem drives into ghost towns. And there was fishing, and there was camping, and there was softball. And there were waffles and pancakes and fries that he served with delight in the shape of the children's initials. Marv respected and supported Andrea's music. Until his health kept him from going, she said he never missed a concert. And his pride in Joel was palpable. Marv is the last of his generation. I will miss him. I will miss his strength, said Joel, as he recounted being carried on the shoulders of his dad, who seemed to him at the time a giant. In this week's Torah portion, we read of Abraham acquiring the first piece of land in Eretz Yisrael, our beloved state of Israel. He purchased a burial place for Sarah, his wife. And on Tuesday, this, our beloved United States, honored its veterans just within a day of Marvin's passing. That these 3 events touch, I'd like to think, is a tribute to Marv's life. Though for many years he has been small in stature, indeed, he was a giant. 95 years of advocacy for friends, colleagues, strangers. Marv didn't just fill his life with days. He lived a life that was full. The family looks forward to you sharing your memories and thoughts of Marv at the reception, which follows at Andrea's home, which previously was Marv's home. And as a reminder, you can also go on Feldman's legacy page and share your memories there. Bechi is the expression of grief and loss experienced by mourners in the entire Jewish community. As you are able, please rise for El Malay. God exalted in full compassion grant perfect peace to you in sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Marvin Meyers, who has gone to this eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech future, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life, and may he rest Mashallah ben Gedalia, Shahalach Rolamo, Began Eden Astikrehu b'seiter chapecha le'olami. Tzur v'tzur achayim et nishmato. Adonai unachalato. V'yanu Shalom. Amen. Shalom. It is a sign of respect to participate in the burial of the deceased. We call it Chesed Shel Emet, kindness of truth. We ask that the family partake first, and then all who wish to do so to offer the blessing to Marv as his soul returns to God. Please be seated. Those who are faith, feel it's your time to come forward. Yeah, as you are able and as you desire to participate in the burial. Al Makomo, Tavo V'Shalom. May Mark go to his place in peace.
Take care, Steve. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, I gotta get home tonight. Great to see you. School. It's good to meet you in person. That's one of my questions. Because of having questions. Still get communication from folks. It's because I'm retired and I forgot that I did so perhaps our past was. Again, in high school, I did ask occasionally. Nothing else, just to check in with our honor guard out there and get occasionally asked by family or something.
All right. Try saying a question. Thank you, Sam. One second.
I did. How about you? why what I mentioned. There. No, no.
You would be. Home asserts that God is everywhere and in everything, physical, spiritual, matter, and energy. In spiritual reality, nothing is lost, not the beloved one's purpose, nor their goodness, nor their real existence. The passage of time cannot remove the memory or wipe away the pain. Consolation is not a natural process. At the end of life, the soul exists eternally. And still, every soul returns to its Macron, its unique place in the world. That is why we ask God for comfort along the way. Kaddish is the traditional mourner's prayer. It praises life even at this time of deepest sorrow. The following English version allows the essence of the Kaddish to be brought forth. We offer praise and thanks throughout the world, which was created according to God's intention. May God's light and love and justice be present in our lives, in the house of Israel, and in all of those who seek the truth. And we say, Amen. We praise continually, yet what we praise is beyond the grasp of the words and the symbols that beckon us towards it. We know God, and yet we do not know God. And still we pray. We pray that God, who upholds the harmony of the cosmos, will create peace within us and between us, and within all who dwell on it. We say, this family tries for Kaddish. halal, shei, isha, the elam, behold, irkata, shirata, tishrakata, benefamata, tahmiran, idama, Rabba, Shemaya, the Chayi, Aleni, Israel. Shalom, for Israel, in may the life which brings peace to the heaven, and comfort to all men, and together we say. Our community turns its thoughts from honoring the deceased to comforting mourners. We transition now from Anu to Abidu. We form two lines facing each other, through which our friends may begin their journey towards their healing spirits. We recite the words of comfort. Hamakom Menachem Etzem B'toch Sha'ar Avelei Zion Yerushalayim. May God comfort you among the mourners of Zion and of Jerusalem. So if you would join me in forming two lines so that they can continue. My congregation was there for 20 years. Yeah. Holidays. Yeah. They are more hours, but I still teach 4 days a week. I did not retire. I only think I retired.